The Earth is plunged into darkness and the vampires come out of the shadows in Blood Hunt Issue 1 by Jed MacKay and Pepe Larraz. The Earth fights against a vampiric invasion as the Avengers respond to all Dark Force users suddenly turning into portals for the Dark Force dimension, which floods into Earth's dimension and blots out the sun and moon. So first thing is that this book makes it very clear that this is spinning out of the current Moon Knight book, Vengeance of the Moon Knight, which is also being written by Jed MacKay. And it sits itself right in that book's story, continuing on from issue 5, meaning that if you aren't really reading that book, it's going to be a little bit of a catch-up for you, like it was for me. Luckily, the writer Jed MacKay does know this and does give kind of a quick, simple explanation on what's going on with the sun and moon being hidden, meaning that vampires now have free reign of Earth. And I'm sure it's going to make people go and pick up that Vengeance of the Moon Knight issue 5 as well. From there, the book moves at a pretty great speed, and we see in minutes after the sun disappearing, vampires just take over every major city in Earth, killing thousands in the process. Since vampires are running around, so is Blade, who after giving Miles Morales a quick mission, obviously for his own tie-in book, he contacts the Avengers, wanting to meet up with them up on their city station in space, since he has an idea of who's behind this and how they can stop it. The Avengers meanwhile have been trying to battle the vampires and try and stop what they can, however it's not working all that much, so of course they go and meet with Blade, and surprise surprise, it was actually a trap laid by the villains. And we finally get introduced to some of the villains of the book. Now these aren't the main villains, these are something called the Blood Coven, and they are led by a giant statue-like being called a Bloodstorm 1. So Pepe Larraz is doing the artwork for this main book, these first 5 issues, and it just looks brilliant. His work is always just top-notch, and his villain designs here specifically are really quite cool. Each has a specific look that makes them stand out. They don't have like a uniform look, they all have a different look from different eras of like horror. I really like how there's one that looks like a more modern day sort of like ghoul, and then you've got like the leader Bloodstorm 1, who is like this giant statue of David like being with blood coming out of his face. It looks like something from the game Blasphemous, a game I really like and like the design of. So this villain, I love the vibe that he's giving off, and I can't wait to see more of him. I do have some problems with the villains though, as in Jed MacKay's Avengers book recently we got a slew of new villains, and they were all analogues to the heroes. You know, each one had a specific hero they were sort of destined to fight. You know, the Iron Man had one who was kind of like an Iron Man, you know, Captain Marvel had one who was kind of like Captain Marvel, stuff like that. And that's what he's done again here, and that's not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, that's something that's, you know, quite ingrained in superhero hero villain dynamics. You know, that obviously always or mostly a dark mirror of the hero. However, he's done it like multiple times in a row now, and you would think by now maybe change things up and do something a little bit different, but he hasn't, and that's one of the few problems I have with this event. There is the cool caveat that instead of actually trying to kill the heroes like past villains he's done have, they're actually trying to turn them into vampires and take them for their master, because we learned that these are vampires who are called ultra vampires, and they are fed on blood of superheroes or the blood of superpowered people, so they're like, you know, extra strong and are able to take on the Avengers. Eventually the team is beaten, and even Thor is seemingly killed by a stake to the head, specifically through one of his eyes, again losing another one of his eyes again. Before they can be turned though, Black Panther engages the city's emergency evacuation protocols and sends Captain America, Vision, Iron Man and Captain Marvel away, leaving himself, Thor and Scarlet Witch behind to be taken and turned. This is some pretty stock standard event storytelling. Introduce some new villains, have them wipe the floor with a big team to prove how strong they are, and set the heroes who are remaining against insurmountable odds. Stock standard storytelling here. Like I said before, I do like that the heroes will be turned into vampires. That should be a lot of fun, and I look forward to seeing these heroes turned and where they will appear across the event, and wondering if that's maybe something they're going to include in the tie-ins, like each of the heroes is going to go off into one of the tie-ins for a specific hero or a specific team of heroes to deal with. It's a lot of fun, that sort of side of things. I like when they do stuff like that with like, oh, we're going to use the heroes as the villains or make them mind controlled or something. That's always a lot of fun, and I'm intrigued to see what they're going to do with that. Blade, meanwhile, goes to see Doctor Strange, who along with Clea are busy trying to find a way to stop the vampires. Across these panels, we finally get a little bit more story, and we learn that the vampires are called the Structure. They're a part of a cult who was spreading across the world before Moon Knight killed their leader over in his own book. But then they found a new leader and are using Atlantean rituals to detonate Dark Force users and block out the sun and invade Earth all at once. Jed gets really interesting here with Strange as well, and making Strange the bit more of the guy who has to make the hard decisions, as we've seen countless times throughout his career. And I like that he makes it known that he will stop these vampires, even if they are ones he once called friends. He'll cut out the cancer. As he says, I like the analog he used there and relating it back to his medical past. Of course, we have one final twist as well, and it's a pretty obvious one, especially with how they were building Blade up through the earlier parts in this book, and that is that Blade has become the new leader of the Structure, and he seemingly kills Doctor Strange by stabbing him with his sword. Now obviously Doctor Strange isn't going to die, he's going to somehow get out of that, because obviously Clea was there as well, so they'll end up fighting Blade probably in the next issue or a tie-in or something. But that's a pretty cool ending. I like that Blade is now seemingly turned against the heroes. I don't know whether this was built up anywhere else. I would have thought they would have mentioned that he has become the leader of the Structure. I'm sure we're going to get backstory on that, because Blade does have tie-ins with this series, so I'm sure we're going to see how he became the leader of the Structure, which is cool. I think that's a neat role for him. It's finally positioning him in the spotlight and making him sort of a main threat or a main player in an event, which is always very fun. So before we cap off this review, I also want to bring up the tie-ins to this event. So far through this first issue, it's a pretty generic idea. Vampires invade Earth. Cool, the heroes have to stop them. You know, it's pretty generic idea for a huge summer event, and it is huge. If you haven't seen what's been going on with this series and its tie-ins, buckle in, because holy fuck, all up, this book has 54 issues, with only 5 of them actually being this main book. Blood Hunt is actually 5 issues, and the rest are all tie-ins or one-shots. Considering what this issue went through with the setup and just how simple it is, I don't see the story warranting that many tie-ins and one-shots. Like, how many stories can you tell that won't just boil down to heroes fighting vampires, heroes win, or vampires, you know, seem to win, and then the hero comes in clutch and helps another hero defeat the vampires? You can only do that so many times before it starts getting repetitive, and this series has 54 of those books. That's a lot of books. That's more than any other event running right now. If you look at stuff like House of Brainiac only has 6 parts and 2 books that are tangentially tying into it. It's not that very big, and that's a summer event as well. Same with Absolute Power, which is going to have a little bit more, but definitely not 54 books. That's insane, and I don't know what the hell is going on over at Marvel that made them think that that was okay, especially in this time and era where comic books are a bit more expensive than they usually are. I know for myself, each of these issues is going to be at least $9, and that's digital as well. That's a lot of fucking money, and I just don't understand what they are doing here. And just thinking of that, having that in the back of my mind while reviewing this book, it brings it down. Because it is like, oh, what ones am I going to have to read to understand what's going on? Am I going to have to read any of these to understand what's going on? Can I just read the main event? Who knows? They haven't really made it any clearer or anything, and I think they're doing that on purpose to get you to buy some of these books and to try and make people buy all 54 of them. It's just insane. Blood Hunt felt like a very generic summer comic event. It had all the hallmarks that we've seen in events of past. New villains who can take down the heroes easily, world-ending threats, and a focus on less popular characters. That's not necessarily a bad thing, but considering how much the event has been set up and advertised and all of the tie-ins this book has, I definitely thought it would provide a little bit more meat on the bone to its plot. I'm going to give this issue a 6.5 out of 10.